Well, good morning, all of you. Welcome to this Sunday morning dose of spirituality, the second session of the re-Christian name Spirituality Basics, where I plan to address some common topics on spirituality, but at a very basic and fundamental level. So today we have two topics. The first is a broad understanding of what are the Vedas, how many Vedas are there, what do they contain, etc. Then we'll see what Vedanta and Upanishads mean and which are the major Upanishads and why. Finally, we'll see what are the differences between spirituality and religion. I mean, if at all, if there is any difference. But all this in a very simplified manner and just as they say, to get a hang of it. So let's start. Veda, as you know, is a Sanskrit word coming from the root word Ved, which means to know. The Vedas are the most ancient of all philosophical and religious texts originating in ancient India. And they are the world's oldest piece of literature. They were penned down about maybe 4,000 to 5,000 years ago by Vyasa, give or take 1,000 years. And by the way, Vyasa merely compiled these Vedas and did not author them. Vyasa literally means to split, and since he split the Vedas into 4 parts, so he is also called the Veda Vyasa. So Vedas are called Apurushya. Apurushya means its authorship is not attributed to any particular person. It is said that the Vedas are the result of divine revelations, which came to the sages and saints through deep meditation. Actually, we have 2 types of ancient scriptures. One are the Shruti scripture and the other are the Smriti scriptures. So Veda is the only Shruti scripture. As we know, Shruti means to hear. And why they are Shruti scriptures? Because they have been passed over generations after generations just by word of mouth. Like in the Jnana Yoga, we follow the system of Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasana, which is first you hear, then you assimilate, and then you put it into practice in the same way. And that's why quite possible that much of it has been lost over a period of time since it was a Shruti. But whatever remains, we will see, is a virtual treasure house. And the other scriptures are Smriti scriptures. Smriti, as we know, Smriti means memory. So these are written out of memory and they are always attributed to an author. So the Smriti scriptures are the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, the Puranas, the Dharma Sutras, etc. They are all Smriti scriptures. We will see there are 4 Vedas: the Rigveda, the Yajurveda, Samaveda, and the youngest of all, Atharva Veda. Rigveda is the oldest, and it is the bulkiest of all Vedas, containing about 10 mandalas or 10 books. There are 4 parts in each Veda. The first part are the Samhitas. Samhitas, they are in the form of hymns and dedicated mostly to gods, and they are all nature gods, like Indra, Agni, Varuna. And in the Vedas, we find 33 gods in total. And I just Googled, how many gods are there in Hinduism today. So the Google came out with a figure of 330 million, 33 crores. But in the Vedas, there were just 33 gods. By the way, Indra was the most popular of the gods in the Vedas. It finds a mention in about 250 places in the Rig Veda. So now, Rig Veda is the principal Veda, and it contains 10,552 verses or the mantras. And these mantras are used in all our religious ceremonies like marriage, death, the thread ceremony, etc. In fact, all the mantras like our Gayatri mantra, the Mahamrityunjaya mantra, they are all from the Rig Veda. Even the word Satyameva Javate, the truth prevails. So that also comes from the Mundaka Upanishad. Now, the next part of the Vedas are called the Brahmanas. What are these? The Brahmanas explain they are the meaning of the Samhitas and also mentions the rituals corresponding to the mantras. Let's say in the wedding ceremony, the priest chants some mantra for performing the wedding. And then there is the ritual of, let's say, the bride and the bridegroom going around the fire 7 times. So that's a ritual. So those rituals are mentioned in the Brahmana portion of the Vedas. Third comes the Arannakas. Aranya means forest. So Arannaka means relating to the forest. They are somehow similar to the Brahmanas, but they deal with the ritualistic sacrifices. The animal sacrifices which used to be done after yagnas or pujas. Ashwamedha yagna, where a horse sacrifice is done. But these are mostly connected with the Shaktism, the practiced in the Shakti temples. We have heard of animal sacrifices being done in the Kali temples. So these are the Arannakas. And the final part of the Vedas are the Upanishads, the fourth part. They are also called the Vedanta. Why? Because they are appearing in the end of the Vedas, the Ant of the Vedas. Ant we know is the end. But actually, if you see, they are not the Ant. They are actually the Siddhant, the final say of the Vedas. So all the final philosophies, the best philosophies, the central teachings of the Vedas are given in the Upanishads or the Vedanta. And if you ask a classical Sanskrit scholar the definition of Vedanta, he will say, Vedanta Nama Upanishad Pramana. That means Vedanta is the source of knowledge known as the Upanishads. And these Upanishads form the foundation of Hinduism. And they contain the highest philosophical wisdom of the Vedas. They form the Gyan Kand of the Vedas. There are 2 kands. First 3, Samhitas, Brahmanas and the Aranyakas, they form the Karma Kand, dealing with the mantras, rituals, etc. Now, Muktika Upanishad is one of the Upanishads. It gives a list of 108 Upanishads. But out of these, 10 are the principal or the Mukha Upanishads. Why these 10 and why they are Mukha? Because about 1300 years ago, Adi Sankaracharya selected these 10 Upanishads and wrote extensive commentary or bhashya on them. So that is why whatever Upanishadic teaching that we come across today, they are always from these 10 Upanishads. So you will rarely find any reference to maybe the Sita Upanishad or the Ram Rahasya Upanishad or the Devi Upanishad. So you don't hear these. Whatever you have heard are mostly out of the 10 which we'll just go through. And the Upanishads usually give the teachings in the form of a dialogue between 2 persons. And mostly it is a teacher and a student, where the student asks questions and the teacher answers them. And all difficult questions, we'll just see later. Only at some place, let's say in the Katha Upanishad, the dialogue is between the young boy Nachiketa and Yamraj, the Lord of Death. So let's see the Upanishads. The first is the Isha Upanishad. Again, one of the smallest Upanishad containing just 18 mantras. It forms part of Yajurveda. Kena Upanishad, Samaveda. Katha Upanishad, very important, favorite of Swami Vivekananda, Yajurveda. Prashna Upanishad, part of Atharva Veda. Why Prashna Upanishad? Because in the Upanishad, 6 questions or 6 prashnas are asked and then they are answered. And just imagine what the first question is. How did life begin? Then the Mundaka Upanishad, Mandukya Upanishad in Atharva Veda. Mandukya, as we saw last time, Mandukya forms the basis or it gives the genesis of Om, what is the meaning of Om and how you can, even achieve enlightenment through Om. Then the Taittiriya Upanishad in Yajurveda, Aitreya Upanishad in Rigveda, Chandoga in Samaveda, and Brihadaranyaka in Yajurveda. Brihadaranyaka, by the way, is the bulkiest of all Upanishads. The Upanishads also contain the Mahavakyas. We know all the four Vedas have four identity statements. We are mostly familiar with at least one of them. We'll just see. The Mahavakya of Atharva Veda is contained in the Mandukya Upanishad, which is Ayam Atma Brahma. The self is the Brahman. Then the Rigveda Mahavakya Pragyanam Brahma is contained in the Aitreya Upanishad. Now the most famous Mahavakya, Tat Tvamasi, that thou art, I think you all have heard of it. That is contained in the Chandogya Upanishad. And finally, another popular one, Aham Brahmasmi, I am the Brahman, that is contained in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad of Yajurveda. Coming to the questions. I mean, here we see what are the kind of questions which are asked and answered in the Upanishads. What is the meaning of life? What happens after death? What is the ultimate reality? What is the purpose of life? What is the one thing knowing which everything else will be known? I mean, it's a very, it's a perplexing question. I mean, this is in fact contained in the Chandogya Upanishad, where the son comes, after graduating, and the father asks him, that what is that one thing knowing which everything else will be known? Because usually the way we look at it is, if I am studying physics, I will have knowledge about physics. If I am studying mathematics, I will have knowledge about mathematics. So how is it possible that by just knowing one thing, everything else will be known? This is addressed in the Upanishads. Now, in the Indian philosophical context, when we use the word Vedanta, it refers to the Prasthanatraya, or the threefold canons of Vedanta. What are these? So first are the Upanishads. They are the Shruti Prasthana. So we have all seen what it is. Second is the Bhagavad-Gita. Bhagavad-Gita is the essence of all Upanishads and was taken by Shri Krishna and set forth in Bhagavad-Gita. So much so that at some places even the verses are absolutely verbatim in the Upanishads and in the Bhagavad-Gita. I mean, fortunately, there was no plagiarism or copyright rules in those days. Bhagavad-Gita is a practical approach to the Upanishads. Sometimes it's also called the fifth Veda. It's a Smriti Prasthana. Again, Vyasa wrote it out of memory, maybe after he compiled the Vedas. And then comes the Brahma Sutras. Again, very important. They from the Nyaya Prasthana, or the logical part of it. So Brahma Sutra is also attributed to Vyasa, and they contain the reasoning and the philosophical reflections of the Upanishads. Because Upanishads are, they are poetic, they are mystical. It'll say the world is unreal, I am not the body, I am not the mind. But then, I am amitabha bose, body, mind, I am here. I am not convinced. So all these questions are discussed threadbare in the Brahma Sutras. And there are about 555 sutras or aphorisms in 4 chapters. And in fact, it is the Brahma Sutras along with the Shankara's commentary on all 3 canonical texts. I mean, Shankara made commentary on all these 3, and that form the foundation or the philosophical base for the popular Uttar Mimamsa school of Indian philosophy. I mean, which also includes Advaita Vedanta. Yeah, so this is a snapshot from Katha Upanishad. I could not make anything out of it. I mean, it's very difficult. It's in Vedic Sanskrit. So this is Katha Upanishad. And now let's see what world says about the Vedic literature or the Upanishads. I mean, we may say that, it's very good, very nice, but what the world says about it. T.S. Eliot, the famous poet, when I read these ancient sages, I see that our philosophers of today are mere schoolboys. Arthur Schopenhauer, the famous German philosopher who had a great influence on Nietzsche. I find Upanishads as the most profitable and elevating reading. It has been the solace of my life and will be the solace of my death. In fact, Schopenhauer used to read the Chandogya Upanishad every day before going to bed. Aldous Huxley, the famous author, British author, later part settled in America, in The Perennial Philosophy, one of his books, He analyzes all religions from Upanishadic viewpoint and calls it the highest common factor of all religions. Evan Thompson, he is a professor of philosophy in the British Columbia University in Vancouver. It says in his book, Waking, Dreaming and Being. It's a book on philosophy, a book on Buddhism, book of consciousness studies. He said that consciousness studies did not begin 20 years ago, but way back during the Vedic times. And the timeline of history, this is a very profound statement. A timeline of history should be before Upanishads and after Upanishads. Usually we see as before Christ and after Christ. So he says that it should be before Upanishads and after Upanishads. What a profound statement. Coming to the next topic, a topic very important, very relevant to all of us, and at the same time often very confusing: spirituality and religion. In all probability, all of you, fall into either of these categories. Either you are spiritual or religious or both. In fact, it is dangerous if you don't fall into any of these. Otherwise, then you will become a believer in Charvakya philosophy. Charvakya, that believes only in the material world. In fact, if you see Indian philosophy, there are two branches. One is the orthodox branch, which is called the Astic, and the heterodox, which is the Nastic. There are 6 schools. And why Astic? It's not that like we think that Astic means one who believes in God. There, the Astic means those schools which believe in the authority of the Vedas. So those are Astic schools. And the schools that do not believe in the authority of the Vedas, those are Nastic schools. The Astic schools are, as you might be knowing, the Sankhya, the Yoga, the Nyaya, the Vaisheshika, Uttar Mimamsa, and Purva Mimamsa. These are the 6 schools, and out of which the Uttar Mimamsa is most popular. That's the Vedanta school and different schools of Vedanta. There are 3 schools in the Nastic branch. That is the Charvakya, the Buddhism, and the Jainism. So the Charvakya believes only in the material world, eat, drink, and be merry. Although practically that's what we must be doing all the time, seeking pleasure out of sensory organs. So anyway, coming back to our topic. So let's begin with the basic question of what is the purpose of life? And there is only one answer to that, both from the spirituality point of view and religion point of view. It is liberation, salvation, or moksha, whatever you call it. But liberation from what? Liberation from suffering, from this cycle of birth and death. So that liberation. Here at the macro level, both spirituality and religion have the same purpose, but the roots, they are very different. Spirituality, as we know, is all about self-inquiry and realizing what we really are, what is our true nature, and then move towards enlightenment. But what about religion? If you look at the higher religion, we have a higher religion and a lower religion. If you look at the higher religion, the purpose is God realization. Look at the lives of all the leading proponents of the world's religions. Buddha, Christ, Prophet Muhammad. They were all enlightened persons, and out of their divine experiences, they laid down the path to enlightenment through some practice and rituals which became their respective religions. Therefore, all religions per se have the same goal, connecting with the divine. This is the higher religion. Though if we talk of the lower religion, we often use God for fulfillment of our worldly desires, like God, let me have 100% marks in so-and-so, please cure my this disease. How many times that we go to a temple and ask for enlightenment, liberation, purity of mind, etc.? Maybe rarely. Now let's see, the goals are the same, but there are some fundamental differences between the two. If you see religion, it is based on objective experience. Objective experience means they are based on external factors like scriptures, rituals, observances, And they are all based on, as we have just seen, the someone else's experience. And in spirituality, it is very much a subjective experience. It is an internal experience, and it's a very personal in nature. And usually we get it through, deep meditation, purity of mind, etc. Then in religion, rules are there, moral rules, ethical rules, and it is very organized. And there are do's and don'ts. Like if you don't do something, a sanction will follow. In spirituality, no rules. You are your own master, and there is no referee to blow a whistle, and everyone follows a different path. So that is spirituality. Then we are born into a religious system. Usually, religion comes by birth to us, and we have to just follow it, whether we like it or not. But that's not so in the case of spirituality. Spirituality, individual is free to choose, the path, free to choose his master, the guru, and that's his choice. In religion, fear is the key, because they say if you do not do something, and it follows with some sanctions. But in spirituality, love is the key, compassion, purity of mind. That is the key in spirituality. Then we have, religion is a sort of easy path, no qualification. You start following a religion from tomorrow. But spirituality is a difficult path. In fact, in the Gyan Yoga, we have the Viveka, Shat Sampad, and Mokshattam. So those are the qualifications for the Gyan Yoga or the spiritual path. So it is difficult. And religion often divides. We see wars being fought over religion, and spirituality, since it is based on love and compassion, it unites. If spirituality is that much superior, then why religion at all? If you look at history, religion played a major role in bringing order in societal behavior. In fact, even the Vedic sages, they also knew that spirituality is difficult. That is why about 80% of the Vedas, they are the Karam Kandas, and 20% is only the Gyan Kand, which are the Upanishads. Also, the path of spirituality is there, and there are no set rules. There are no fixed rules that can apply to everybody. There is no one size fits all in spirituality. Also, it's difficult to find the right guru. And finally, in spirituality, like in Advaita Vedanta, there is no God or deity to ask for boons or your wishes. It says, Aham Brahmasmi, that I am the Brahman. Therefore, the path of spirituality is difficult. But at the higher level, we have seen that both spirituality and religion, they have the same goals of liberation, but the paths are different. Finally, I will end with a famous quote of Swami Vivekananda. You all might have heard it. Each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this divinity within by controlling nature, external and internal. Do this by work, worship. Work is Karma Yoga, or worship, Bhakti Yoga, or psychic control, the Raja Yoga, or philosophy, the Gyan Yoga. By one or more or all of these and be free. So, by hook or crook, just do it. So I'm happy that since all of you are listening to me, your spiritual journey has begun. And I hope and pray to God that you find liberation in this life itself. As usual, I'll end with a Vedic mantra. Asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mriturma amritam gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. Thank you so much.